Fairwater wasn't the kind of town that made headlines, until bodies started dropping. No warnings, no suspects, just people collapsing like their hearts short-circuited. At least, that's what everyone assumed. The medical examiner knew better. Every heart looked smashed from the inside, like a fist had closed around it. Old rumors resurfaced even faster. Folks whispered that the shadow of death had come back to finish the job it started decades ago. Living in the middle of this chaos is Frank Bannister, a man who's been drifting ever since the night his wife died in a brutal car crash. Frank survived, but something in him changed. Now he sees ghosts like they're just regular neighbors. He even hangs out with a trio of them: Cyrus, a loud, smooth-talking ex-gangster, a jittery nerd who never stops panicking, and the Judge, a grumpy, half-decayed ghost straight out of the Old West. Frank ditched his old life and turned this bizarre ability into a business. If your house creaks or something floats off a shelf, he'll show up with his ghost-busting service, for a fee, of course. One day, while driving to another haunted home, he zones out and crashes straight through some guy's lawn. The homeowner, Ray, is furious, but Frank just hands him a business card and promises to fix everything before driving off like nothing happened. Later that evening, Ray's wife Lucy, who works as a physician, makes a house call to a creepy old estate on the edge of town. Inside lives Mrs. Bradley, a retired psychiatrist with a stare sharp enough to cut glass, and her fragile daughter Patricia. Lucy's there because Patricia accidentally sliced her hand while chopping vegetables, but the cut is so deep she needs immediate care. Lucy urges them to go to the hospital. Mrs. Bradley shuts that down instantly. Then Lucy notices something she can't ignore: dark bruises wrapped around Patricia's throat. The pattern looks like fingers. When Lucy quietly asks what happened, Patricia freezes, and her mother shuts the conversation down with ice-cold authority. Shaken, Lucy returns home to Ray. They barely have time to settle in before their house starts behaving like it's alive: objects moving, lights flickering, cold spots drifting through the hall. Something unseen is circling them, and whatever has been haunting Fairwater has now found their doorstep. Lucy barely has time to blink before the bed she's sitting on lifts off the floor like someone hit an invisible switch. The entire house starts shaking, picture frames rattling, drawers slamming, lights flickering like they're about to pop. That's when it hits her: something is in the house with them. Something that isn't human. She grabs her phone and calls the only person who might believe her: Frank. Frank shows up fast. One step inside and he says, "Okay, I've handled some freaky cases, but whatever's in here is on a whole different level. Don't worry, I'll take care of it." Then he adds with a crooked grin, "And you don't owe me a cent. I wrecked your lawn this morning, so consider this my apology." Moments later he announces the job done, ghost removed, house safe. But while talking to Ray, he freezes. A glowing number, like it's carved out of light, is stamped across Ray's forehead. Ray brushes him off, assuming Frank's pulling another scam, and throws him out of the house. The second Frank leaves, a dark shape rises across the living room wall like it's peeling itself out of the shadows. What Lucy and Ray don't know is that Frank didn't show up alone. He secretly sent his ghost buddies ahead of time to spook Ray just enough so Ray would demand his help, and cancel the bill for the lawn Frank destroyed. But the next morning everything changes. As Frank is walking down the street, Ray comes running toward him, except it isn't Ray. It's Ray's ghost. He slams right into Frank, screaming, "Help me. They're burying me." Frank has to break it to him: "Ray, you're already dead." Together they head to the graveyard, where Ray's funeral is in progress. Lucy spots Frank and whispers, "Everyone thinks you're a fraud, but I don't. Tell me, can you really see him?" Frank nods. Later, Lucy meets Frank at a restaurant, hoping for answers. She asks him to find out from Ray's ghost where he invested her missing money. Ray admits, through Frank, that he blew it on a stupid, shady deal. Lucy is crushed. She confesses that she and Ray were never truly honest with each other, that their marriage was more tension than love. As they talk, Frank gently places his hand on hers. Ray, watching from the other side, loses it. A wine glass shoots off the table and shatters all over Frank's clothes. Frank excuses himself and heads to the restroom to clean up. That's when he spots another man, with a glowing number on his forehead, just like Ray had. Only this one is different, higher. Frank's stomach drops. Something is hunting people in numerical order. Before he can react, the restroom mirror ripples like water. A black, hooded shadow crawls out of it and drives a spectral hand straight into the man's chest. His heart collapses in its grip. The man crumples to the floor, dead. Frank watches, horrified, as the man's soul rises out of his body. A doorway made of blinding light opens in midair, and the spirit is pulled inside before the portal snaps shut. Frank bolts outside and jumps into his car, chasing the shadow through the streets of Fairwater. He finally understands what's been killing people: this thing, this creature, this hunter. But no matter how fast he drives, the shadow keeps slipping into darkness, always one step ahead. Frank loses the shadow again, it slips away like smoke, and meanwhile, Lucy gets dragged into the police station. The cops already think Frank's a walking red flag, and since he was with her at the scene of the latest death, they're convinced he's tied to everything. They want her version of the story. But things get worse when an FBI agent steps in. He lays out Frank's past like he's reading a crime novel. Years ago, back when Frank was still an architect, he'd been building his own dream home. On the day his wife died, neighbors heard them arguing before they drove off together. Minutes later, the car crashed. Frank's wife was killed instantly. And when authorities found her body, someone had carved a number into her forehead with a knife. The agent leans forward and says, "And guess what? Frank always kept a utility knife in his car. We never found it. Still missing to this day. And when we located Frank after the crash, 8 hours had passed. He claimed he remembered nothing." Back outside, Frank is spiraling, fear, confusion, guilt, everything crushing him at once. Then he sees it, a column of blinding white light pouring down from the sky, the same light that pulls spirits from this world into the next. That means someone just died. Frank races toward it and finds the body of a young guy, freshly killed. One look at the ghost's forehead and he sees it, another glowing number. The Reaper has struck again. And the body count has climbed to 28. Frank is turning to leave when he spots a familiar face, a sharp-tongued newspaper editor who's covered his ghost scams for years. But now he sees the harsh truth, there's a number burning across her forehead too. She's next. She sneers at him, assuming he's there to swindle money again. Frank warns her, quietly but urgently, "You need to get out of here. You're next in line." She immediately explodes, yelling to everyone around, "Did you hear that? He's threatening me." A crowd forms. The editor keeps shouting. And that's all it takes for the police, already convinced Frank is behind every murder, to storm in. Guns come out. Officers shove him back. Now, the entire town believes Frank Bannister is the serial killer haunting Fairwater. Everyone at the scene is convinced the pattern is obvious. Frank was present at the last murder, and now he's standing in the middle of another one. To the police, it's an open and shut case. But as they circle him, Frank suddenly spots it, the same shadow he's been chasing, gliding between people like a living void. No one else can see it. To them, the killer is Frank. To Frank, the killer is standing right behind the editor. Just as the Reaper lunges for her, one of Frank's ghost allies, the grizzled old judge, appears out of nowhere and unloads spectral bullets straight into the darkness. The creature recoils and slips away, only to return seconds later, angrier than before. Before it can crush the editor's heart, Frank's other two ghost friends rip through the room, grab the editor, and help Frank drag her to his car. They speed off, but the shadow follows faster than headlights. It swarms the road, slams into Frank's car, and sends it flipping. By the time Frank crawls out, the Reaper is already standing over the editor. Its hand plunges into her chest. Her scream cuts off. She dies the same horrific way Frank's wife once did. And suddenly, out of nowhere, Frank sees a flash, his wife's body lying in the wreckage years ago, a number carved into her forehead. A detail he never remembered until now. The editor's spirit rises from her body, trembling with rage. "What did killing me get you?" she spits. "You killed your wife too." Frank stumbles back, horrified. The words hit him like a hammer. Shaken, broken, he walks straight into the police station where Lucy is still being questioned. "She's dead," he tells them. "The editor, she's gone." The cops don't hesitate, they cuff him on the spot. The FBI agent who's been circling Frank finally gets his moment. He sits across from him and listens as Frank insists a shadow creature is doing the killing. The agent stares at him like he's studying a damaged specimen. "Frank," he says calmly, "you did all of this. You just don't remember. The ghosts you talked to? They're hallucinations. You're sick. And you need to accept it. And the terrifying part? Frank starts believing him. Because when Cyrus and the nervous nerd, his longtime ghost companions, rush into the interrogation room to help him, Frank can't see them. His brain, shaken by everything, has begun accepting the FBI's version of reality. If the ghosts aren't real, maybe the Reaper isn't either. Maybe he really is the killer. Meanwhile, Lucy, desperate for answers, goes to Frank's home. Inside she finds a voicemail, Mrs. Bradley's voice trembling with fear. Patricia's mother says her daughter has been touched by the devil and that something summoned Lucy there. "Please," she begs, "I need help, my daughter is dangerous." Lucy freezes. Earlier she saw the bruises on Patricia's throat. Marks that looked like fingerprints. Now Lucy realizes something chilling. Mrs. Bradley might not be crazy. She might be terrified. And Patricia might not be the victim, but the threat. Lacey bursts into Patricia's house, only to find the place strangely quiet. Her mom isn't home. Without wasting a second, Lacey blurts out the truth. Patricia's mother isn't just unstable, she's dangerous, and Patricia needs to leave immediately. But Patricia refuses. She just stares at a glass jar on her shelf, her voice trembling as she tells Lacey she wouldn't understand. When Lacey reaches for the jar, Patricia snatches it first and finally confesses. The ashes inside belong to her father, a man who murdered someone and then took his own life. Her mother is convinced Patricia was somehow responsible, so she forces her to keep the ashes in her room as punishment. Before Lacey can process this, Patricia's mom returns. Patricia panics, shoves Lacey into a closet, and slams the door. Inside, in the dark, Lacey's hand brushes against something, a knife. Not just any knife, the same weapon tied to the unsolved killing of Frank's wife, the one with numbers carved into her skull. The case police could never crack. Shocked, Lacey escapes the house and rushes straight to the prison where Frank is being held. He wants nothing to do with her wild accusations, until she finally convinces him, snapping him back into clarity. But then Frank freezes. There's a number glowing faintly on Lacey's forehead. The mark. The sign that the shadowy entity has chosen its next victim, her. The darkness arrives moments later. Frank tries to fight it, but his hands pass right through the creature. Just as the entity reaches into Lacey's chest, two familiar spirits, Cyrus and Nerd, Frank's old allies, appear and yank the creature away. But the shadow refuses to stay gone. It surges back for another attack, forcing Lacey and Frank to flee the prison in a desperate escape. Frank is determined to save her, not just because he cares, but because they've fallen deeply for each other. And he knows the only way to destroy the shadow is to die, rip his soul free, and fight it from the other side. He even raises a gun to do it, but Lacey stops him. She has a better plan, one only a doctor would know. A controlled death. Hypothermia, the right drug cocktail, a temporary shutdown of his heartbeat, enough to separate his soul from his body without losing him forever. And just before real death claims him, she'll jolt him back with a defibrillator. It's insane. It's risky. It's the only shot they have. Together, they begin the process. Frank only has a few minutes, just enough time for his soul to break free, confront the entity, and get pulled back before his body slips into permanent death. If Lacey doesn't revive him in time, he's gone forever. They lower his body into a freezing cold storage chamber, forcing his temperature to plummet. Hypothermia isn't just cold, it's the edge of oblivion, where the body shuts down and the soul drifts loose. As the procedure begins, everything falls apart. An FBI agent storms in, furious that Frank might escape the fate the government wants for him. He arrests Lacey on the spot and drags her out, leaving Frank's lifeless body behind. Meanwhile, Frank's soul slips free and follows, finding Lacey in a holding area. He pushes her to run, because he can feel it. The shadow is coming. And it does. The creature materializes, and Frank's disembodied spirit clashes with it in a violent, surreal fight. He finally overpowers it, long enough to see its true identity. Johnny Bartlett. A psychopath who slaughtered dozens inside a psychiatric hospital decades ago, desperate to carve his name into history as the most notorious serial killer ever. And he wasn't alone. Patricia, barely a teenager back then, hopelessly infatuated with him, helped him. She was too young for the death penalty and ended up with life in prison. Johnny, however, was executed, and his rage survived as the shadow hunting them now. Before Frank can finish him off, Lacey breaks free from custody and races back to Frank's body. She fires the defibrillator, slamming electricity into his chest. The jolt yanks his soul back, just in time. But Frank didn't return empty-handed. Before escaping the void, he ripped away Johnny Bartlett's cloak of power, the spectral veil that let him reach into people's chests and stop their hearts. Now Johnny is weaker, but not gone. Once Frank wakes, he tells Lacey the truth. Johnny is back, killing again, and Patricia is the next link in his chain. She needs to be taken out of that house immediately. Lacey rushes to Patricia's home, tells her she has to leave now, but Patricia's mother steps in, cold and unmoving, refusing to let her daughter go. Lacey demands that Patricia come with her, but Patricia's mother immediately refuses. When Lacey confronts her about hiding Frank's missing knife in her wardrobe, Patricia's mother freezes, realizes Lacey has been in her room, and storms upstairs, Patricia hurrying behind her. After a tense silence, Patricia comes back alone and calmly says her mother has agreed to go to the police and will come down soon. But before that can happen, Johnny Bartlett's ghost drifts into the room. Though he can no longer touch Lacey physically, his presence instantly changes Patricia. Her voice softens, her eyes glaze, and she begins responding to whispers only she can hear. Johnny manipulates her, telling her they must reclaim their old record of killings and that Lacey must be the next victim. Patricia pretends she needs her coat, slips into her room, and secretly grabs a knife instead. Meanwhile, Lacey, feeling something is wrong, goes upstairs, only to discover Patricia's mother dead on the floor, murdered moments earlier. Patricia appears behind her with the knife and lunges, but before she can stab Lacey, Frank bursts into the house. Now consumed by Johnny's influence, Patricia tries to kill them both. Frank and Lacey flee into another room, where Johnny tries to attack Lacey through an old photograph on the wall, the ghostly face pushing through the image to grab her. Frank smashes the frame, and in that instant Johnny's spirit is sucked into the urn Patricia kept in her room, the one she claimed held her father's ashes. When Frank examines it, he sees the truth written on the label: the ashes belonged to Johnny Bartlett, not her father. Patricia had lied completely. Realizing they must neutralize Johnny permanently, Frank says the urn must be taken to a church. Lacey remembers an old hospital nearby that has a chapel inside, the same psychiatric hospital where Johnny murdered dozens of people in 1964 before his execution. They rush there, entering the abandoned, dust-covered halls, and as soon as they step inside, Frank is hit with intense visions, ghostly flashes of the massacre, screaming patients, and the horrific events that unfolded the night Johnny and young Patricia carried out their killing spree. Patricia reaches the hospital like a woman completely consumed, her footsteps echoing through the empty, dust-coated corridors as she charges toward Frank and Lacey with a crazed determination. Her breath is ragged, her grip on the knife is white-knuckled, and her eyes flick with the same feverish devotion she once had as a teenager helping Johnny Bartlett kill for pleasure. Before Frank and Lacey can react, the FBI agent who has been hunting Frank since the beginning storms in behind her. He's frantic, furious, and convinced that he's finally cornered the man responsible for every murder in town. In the chaos, his hand closes around the urn, Johnny Bartlett's true remains, the very vessel trapping the serial killer's spirit. The agent yanks the lid open, thinking it's nothing more than evidence. But the second the seal breaks, a violent pulse of cold air bursts out of the urn, and Johnny's ghost tears into the room like a streak of black lightning. Patricia feels him rushing into her again, her posture stiffens, her face twists into a smile that isn't human, and the temperature in the hallway drops as Johnny's laughter echoes off the peeling walls. The agent, not understanding what he just unleashed, draws his gun and aims straight at Frank. He's shaking, overwhelmed, shouting that it all ends here, that Frank's killing spree is done. Johnny encourages Patricia to egg him on, whispering like a devil in her ear. Just as the agent tightens his finger on the trigger, Patricia suddenly raises her own gun and fires toward Frank. Frank, realizing what she's doing at the last possible instant, dives backward off the ledge. Patricia's bullet flies over his shoulder, and slams into the FBI agent's chest. He staggers in shock, drops his gun, and collapses lifelessly on the floor as Johnny's freed spirit howls with laughter. Meanwhile, Frank plunges several stories down the dark elevator shaft, crashing brutally onto the metal grating below. The pain is blinding, his ribs feel shattered, his breath is shallow, and for a moment he thinks he's going to die. And then the memories hit him like a flood. He sees his wife, her terrified face, her screams, the moonlight over her blood-stained skin. He sees Johnny Bartlett carving a number into her forehead while Patricia, barely a teenager but already fully corrupted, holds her down with a chilling calm in her eyes. He sees himself discovering her body, then waking up with the police over him, his mind so traumatized it erased the entire event. That same night, in that same moment of shock, his ability to see spirits first awakened. Now, lying broken at the bottom of the shaft, Frank blinks through the haze and looks up. Patricia stands at the top, silhouetted by flickering broken lights. Johnny's ghost swirls around her like a cloak of black smoke, his hollow face curling into a grotesque grin. Patricia begins to descend the stairs slowly, each step deliberate, the knife catching the dim orange glow of the emergency lights. Johnny moves beside her, whispering commands with rising excitement, his voice sharp and cold as glass. "Finish him," Johnny urges. "Do it," he hisses. "End him." Patricia tightens her grip on the knife, her expression blank and obedient, Johnny's perfect puppet, while Frank, battered and half-conscious, realizes he has only seconds before they reach him. Patricia lunges at Frank with full force, ready to finish him, but when she pulls the trigger, click. Nothing. She looks down and realizes the gun is empty. Rage flashes across her face. Without hesitation, she flips the gun in her hand and brutally wraps it around Frank's throat, squeezing with all her strength. Frank struggles, choking, but she doesn't stop, she keeps tightening her grip until his body finally goes still. Lacey watches helplessly, tears streaming, because Johnny Bartlett's ghost has her pinned in place, one icy hand clamped around her throat, freezing her in terror. She can't move. She can't scream. She can only watch Frank die in front of her. Then Patricia turns, breathing heavily, her face twisted, and begins stalking toward Lacey with the bloodlust Johnny planted inside her. Knife in hand. Eyes hollow. Steps slow and determined. Johnny's ghost slithers behind her like a shadow, urging her forward. But before she can strike, a sudden pulse of energy sweeps through the room. Frank's spirit tears free from his body. Glowing, furious, and no longer bound by flesh. In one swift motion, Frank's spirit grabs Patricia's soul and rips it straight out of her body, sending her collapsing to the floor like a hollow shell. The air splits open behind them, an eerie, swirling doorway to another realm opens, a portal glowing with blue fire and drifting ash. It's the place where human souls are carried away, or dragged. Frank, now only a spirit, pulls Patricia's soul toward the portal. She fights, screams, claws at the air, but he drags her closer and closer to the edge. Once he has her at the threshold, Frank turns and shouts into the darkness. "Johnny! If you want your girlfriend, come get her!" Johnny Bartlett's ghost shrieks with fury. He shoots across the room like a black storm and dives straight into the portal after them, unwilling to let Patricia go, even into the afterlife. As the chaos around them swirled like a storm of loose spirits, he grabbed Patricia's fading soul by the wrist and yanked her free from Frank's collapsing astral form, declaring that they were heading back, ready to unleash hell on the people who wronged them. But before they could even take a step, the swirling portal behind them twisted into something sinister, stretching open like the jaws of a demon. A massive, nightmarish creature crawled out, its roar shaking the very ground, and in an instant both of them were sucked downward, not toward Earth, but straight into the underworld itself. Down there, in the dim red glow of the abyss, Frank suddenly saw two familiar spirits, Cyrus and Nerd, his friends who had died on Earth but were finally free. They told him gently, "Your time isn't up. You don't belong here yet. Go home." And then, through the haze of fire and drifting souls, Frank saw another figure, his wife, her presence warm and soft despite the darkness around them. She touched his face and whispered, "Live. Be happy." With that blessing, Frank was pulled violently upward, crashing back into his own body on Earth, waking up alive. From that moment on, he and Lacey built a new life together, still human, still fragile, but connected in a way few people could ever understand. And somewhere in that rebirth, Lacey discovered something unbelievable: she could now see spirits too. And with that final twist, their strange, haunting, beautiful story came to an end.